Okay, well, good to see everybody. Happy Monday. Actually, I see none of you, but I know you're there. Very good day today. You should have a very good day today. My classes are unscripted. This week I will be in New York for most of the week, so classes might be a little choppy in terms of starting on time and coordinating and making sure whatever. So just bear with me. Okay, so we're starting a new simon. We more or less closed on what we spoke about last week. Pas Yisrael, you should always try to get bread baked by a Jew. If you can't, that's fine. Kabbalistically, though, you should have Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, in order to have Pas Yisrael bread baked by a Jew. Bishul Yisrael, food cooked by a non-Jew, is a problem. You have to have food cooked by a Jew. Basic rule is which foods have to be cooked by a Jew. Anything that you cannot eat raw, and anything that is fitting to be on the table of a king. So what's a food that wouldn't be fitting? So the big controversy is potatoes. Some say potatoes can be cooked by a non-Jew, no problem. So potato chips from Wise or whatever is not a problem. Others maintain no. Nowadays potatoes are a problem, are considered chashuv, considered something of substance, and therefore you cannot. You have to have bishul yisrael, and polenta is something is kind of falls under the category of bishul yisrael. Is like a potato. Anybody? I don't know what other items. I can't really think of any items that do not are not. We eat everything nowadays. We're just animals.
What about meat?
Meat for sure. Meat for sure has to be cooked by a Jew. Now, what does it mean to be cooked by a Jew? You can't eat meat raw. The thing is about what is. But let's be clear about what does it mean, bishul yisrael. If you go into a kosher restaurant, 99% of the time, like a nice kosher restaurant, the chef is not going to be a Jew. That's how you know it'll taste better. Just kidding. No, what it means to be cooked by a Jew is the Jew had to have assisted in the cooking process to any extent, which couldn't just mean flipping on the pilot light, the pilot light, or stoking the coals, or moving the temperature up and down a little bit. That's all it means. And then you have to have a mashgiach, someone who watches over the whole process. You have a question over here. Steak tartare is eaten raw. Oh, steak tartare is eaten raw. Interesting. So what about steak tartare? I've had steak tartare. It's disgusting. I actually had it in a French restaurant, Bella. Yeah, that's probably why you know that. The other people liked it. I don't know. That's a good question. Steak tartare can be eaten raw. I don't know if that's like a widely accepted thing. Maybe it is. Whatever. For sure, meat has to be bishul yisrael. That's like because it's something chashuv. It's something that is fitting to be on the table of a king, right? So,
Are there any exceptions for like less valuable types of meat? Like, because you can cut up the whole cow, and each different part of the cow has a different price. Like some are nicer than others, like leaner,
right.
tastier, and
Yeah.
then even between animals, uh, like chicken is much more cost effective, like per pound than steak.
Yeah.
So like, is there a sliding scale or anything
No.
like
No, it's a good
that?
question.
Okay.
No, there
Yeah.
isn't. There isn't. It's a good question. There is not. A chicken. Where was I? I was in Uruguay. Chicken was more expensive than cow. Interestingly enough, I think it's like that in South Africa also. Cow is in such abundance that chicken is more of a nobody even eats it anyway. The chicken, but it was cheaper than the cow, which was kind of eye opening for me. No, all meat. I hear this thing about steak tartare, but for sure, meat is so chashuv, so important that it's for sure has to be cooked by a Jew. Now, again, what does it mean cooked by a Jew? It just means the Jew has to just have assisted in the process to some extent. And we explained that even if it was in your own home and you have a maid, yeah, what if it's in your own home and your maid is not Jewish? So there we can be lenient. We can be lenient about the maid cooking your food, unless he or she's cooking for themselves. Okay, that's that's pretty much that. It's pretty much that. Yeah. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about washing very briefly. This is one of the shortest chapters in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's only like 3 halachas. Washing before a meal. First of all, why do we wash before a meal? And what is a meal? So a meal really is when you have one of the 5 grains and and you couple it with like substantive amounts of food. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with bread. A meal could be you have some crackers and then a bunch of cholent. In that case, you do have to bench, you have to make Birkat Hamazon afterwards. And do people do that? No. You just don't really see it very often done, but it's supposed to be done. It doesn't excuse, it's ignorance of the law is not an excuse for breaking law. As my father-in-law, who is a police auxiliary officer, would say. Actually, was he a sheriff? A deputy sheriff. As a side gig, as a fun thing. I don't think he gets paid. So whenever you're going to sit down for a meal, you have to wash your hands beforehand. And the reason why we wash our hands is to remember in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple, they would wash their hands before the service. A meal is part of your service of God. At least that's the mindset we're supposed to have. Yeah, the classic story, one of my favorite stories of all time. I know I've told it to you. There was this is a true story, a yeshiva student who was known to daven, pray the morning prayers at length, and he was a great head. He was able to learn, and he davened with sweetness, and it was great. And then he would take a break. Then he would go and he would eat. What would he do? He would go and have breakfast. Then he'd come back, and he would fall asleep, and it bothered him. Like, why? And it bothered the mashgiach, the leaders, the manal, the staff of the yeshiva. Why would he fall asleep? He fall asleep every time. He would daven. He was a good guy, but he would sleep during Talmud class, Talmud time. So they brought it up to the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, who ran the yeshiva, and so the Rebbe Rashab said, "Okay, bring him in. Let me talk to him." So he asks him, like, what do you do? What's your seder of the day? What's your order of the day? He goes, I wake up early, I go to the mikvah, I learn for 4 hours, and then I daven for 3-4 hours. And then that's it. And then I go and I learn, and I'm very tired after. He goes, well, what do you do right before you fall asleep? He's like, well, it's breakfast time. And he goes, oh, you like breakfast? He's like, yeah, breakfast is good. I like eating breakfast. And he goes, the breakfast is what's making you tired. And the Rebbe Rashab said, you see breakfast as like a break, a little snack. And here's my little break between my davening, my prayer, and then my learning. But you have to see it as a continuation of your prayer. It's your continuation of serving God. The Rebbe would say, a chassid goes to the bathroom like a chassid, he sleeps like a chassid, he eats like a chassid. Yeah, he's always on. And so even when we sit down to eat our meal, it's a very holy thing. All 4 elements, to get a little Kabbalistic, all 4 elements of are present at the table. We have the mineral life. Usually you're supposed to have salt on the table, whether you use salt or not. Also, you have salt on the table because it is like an altar. And an altar the altar in the Holy Temple would have salt on it at all times. So we have the mineral life. You usually have a vegetative life. You should have some sort of vegetable at the table. And then you have animal, right? For dinner, you should maybe have some fish. You have fish. And then you have the human. So you have all 4, not 4 elements. You have 4 levels of life in, I forgot what they're called. The tzach. What is it called? You probably know. It's slipping my mind. The 4 levels of life.
It's like the nefesh, the 4 levels of the nefesh.
It's the 4 levels. It's the 4 levels of. Oh, Yisrael, you probably know also. What is it? What's it called? Tetzach. Doimim tzmei chai medaber. You guys help me out. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
The 4 levels. Anyway, you have the 4 levels. Huh?
No, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, fine. Okay, I believe you.
Proper name is called.
They have the 4 levels. Anyway, so it's a time of elevation. It's a time of great elevation, and there's an ability to elevate all the elements of life, all the 4 levels of life. That's why it says in Perki Avos, in Ethics of Our Fathers, anyone who doesn't say words of Torah at the table, it's as if he made sacrifices he ate from the dead, he made sacrifices to the dead, because you wasted such a great opportunity. So anyway, we wash our hands before a meal because it's a holy endeavor. And so, what is a meal? So usually we always associate a meal with bread because that's usually when you're going to have like when you're going to eat bread. That means you're really having a meal. But really, it's anytime you're going to have a lot of substance together with the four species. I mean, the five grains of Eretz Yisrael.
Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Moshe Mazel Tov.
So-
Unbelievable. Okay, I didn't see that you came on. Mazel Tov, huge Mazel Tov. Anyway, we'll speak after.
So you wash your hands even without bread when you have a meal without bread?
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. So no, normally we don't do that. You should, if you know that you're going to have one of the five grains and a large meal, you should wash. You should wash, meaning you should have bread at that meal. You should really wash your hands because it's a meal, and you're gonna. But we don't. We try only to wash when we're gonna have bread. So if you know a kiddush on Shabbos, yeah, what's the most common thing that happens? You go to kiddush on Shabbos, at least by our place. So there's challah. There's also like a lot of crackers, and we have a lot of cholent, and there's a lot of meat, and there's fish. So if I'm gonna, this happens all the time. If I'm gonna eat some crackers and then have a whole bowl of cholent, that's a problem because I have to make birkat hamazon. I should really make I have to, according to Shulchan Aruch, and the Rabbi Silverberg always announces this. You should make birkat hamazon when you're done. Now, what do we always do if we know we're going to make birkat hamazon after? You should have had bread. You should have washed your hands. So if you know that you're going to go ahead and eat a huge meal with one of the five grains, you should go ahead and you should either not do it if you don't have any bread, or if you have bread, you should go ahead and wash your hands and have bread. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Is there a difference? Is there a difference between mezonot and hamotzi? Like,
not with regards to, good question. Yeah, not with regards to birkat hamazon.
So you would bench for mezonot?
Yes, if you ate a lot of substantive food afterward, then you should. According to Shulchan Aruch, you should. Yes.
Blowing my mind over here.
Nobody does it, right? But it's like the Rabbi Silverberg like goes on like 3 months of a tirade telling everybody at Kiddush, you must wash for bread. Now they provide bread. Yes, you should, and it becomes a problem. What?
So is that on? I understand in Shabbos we always have, we always have hamotzi for, we have bread for during Shabbos, Friday night, Saturday.
Yeah.
But during the weekday, we don't eat bread, or I don't eat bread.
Okay.
So,
but
yeah. So what you're saying is, I know the Sephardics do that. That's a Sephardic custom. They didn't know we did that, but so you're saying that we should wash.
But if you know that only when is it a problem? Only when you're going to have mizonot, crackers, and then like a meal. Basically, you're having a meal just without bread. So that's a problem. If you're going to have crackers, any mizonot, any one of the five grains, together with a meal, like a big meal, like a steak or a bunch of fish, that you're very likely. That very likely necessitates you to make a birkat hamazon after, not alamichya, not the the short birkat, not the short mizanot bracha, but birkat hamazon. It's a problem. So the best thing to do, if you want to go ahead and have like a meal, like if you're having some crackers and then like a bunch of cold cuts, whatever you guys call them, deli meat, whatever, you should make the al hamichya on the crackers, the after blessing on the crackers, and then have your meal. Then eat whatever you want to eat. Don't do it together because it's going to be, unless you wash for bread. And it's going to talk about that here. Like when do you, what you should do if you are in danger of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a meal now. I'm about to eat a meal. Like I find myself eating a lot and I just had a cracker. What do I do? So the best thing to do is really stop, make the after blessing, and then go ahead and just eat a meal. Because you might have to make a birkat hamazon, and it's a problem because it's a weird birkat hamazon. It feels very awkward because you didn't actually have any bread, but you're going to make a birkat hamazon. Okay, we'll go see a little bit inside, and then we'll drill it home again. So if before washing for the meal, you intend, so you're going to have a meal, you're going to wash for bread. This is like a situation during the week, Shabbos, during the week, whenever. You're going to sit down and you're going to have a baguette and you're going to eat a meal. So what if you if before washing for the meal, you intend to eat various foods that will be served during the meal, regardless whether there are foods that require an extra bracha when eaten during the meal, such as fruits. Okay, so you guys know about this? There are certain foods that are not considered part of the meal. I don't know if you ever, so like a Shabbos table, this happens all the time. Come to my house, yeah, Shabbos. If I bring out in the middle of the meal, I bring out dessert, you make a separate blessing on the dessert. Because the dessert, it's not considered really part of the meal. If you were to have fruit in the middle of your steak dinner, you would have to make a blessing on that fruit, because the fruit is considered more of a dessert. It's not considered a meal. So, excuse me, you have to make your own special blessing. It has to have its own blessing. Okay. Okay, so what happens? Okay, so let's just bring this in here. Okay, I'll say this outside a little bit. When you wash for a meal, you have in mind, you go ahead and you make hamotzi and you eat your bread. Whatever food comes out your way, you don't have to make a separate blessing on, except unless it's a dessert type of food. Because very often you go to someone's house for Shabbos and you wash, you sit down, you eat, but you don't even know what you're being served. You might know, okay, usually I'll probably have some sort of chicken, some sort of meat, probably some fish, but you don't know. There could be some bizarre salad coming out. It doesn't matter. You make a separate blessing on the salad because you're basically saying, whatever food comes my way, I'm making it part of the meal. Now, there's exceptions to that rule, that when you do have to make a separate blessing. And the rule is with wine and dessert. If you were not drinking wine, and they bring wine in the middle of the meal, you should make a hagafen. Same with dessert. You should make the blessing on the dessert. Now, you guys know there's a special blessing if more expensive wine comes to the table. I've seen it done. I think I've done it like once in my life. But meaning I just like, you just never really see it done, but you're really supposed to do it. It's called hatov v'ametiv. Yeah, if you're drinking wine, and then better wine comes to the table, somebody brings a better bottle of wine, and you drink that wine, you make a separate blessing. This is a special blessing for them. Now, what if you're drinking wine before the meal starts? Does it become part of the meal? So it depends. It depends if you know that you're going to have, while you're drinking that wine before the meal starts, but you know you're going to have a meal, that wine becomes part of the meal. So that's like with Kiddush, right? We make Kiddush on Friday night or Shabbos day, or Yom Tiv. We don't make a separate after blessing for the Kiddush, right? It becomes part of the meal. But if you didn't have that intention, it becomes problematic. And what the Shulchan Aruch is saying over here, you should bench on the wine before bench, meaning you should say the after bracha before you begin your meal. It's very practical. This is very practical. Same things with other foods, desserts. Let's say you're like eating some desserts and you're like, you know what? Fine, I'll sit down and I'll eat a meal with everybody else. You should bench. If you didn't have in mind that you were going to eat the meal, you should bench. You should say the after bracha on whatever you were eating or drinking before you begin the meal. If you never had intention of sitting down to eat the meal, you were just like having appetizers, but you're like, I'm not going to sit down and eat a meal. And then you decide I'm going to have a meal, like wash for bread and eat like a substantive amount. Make a bracha achrona, make an after blessing before you begin the meal. That's what this halacha is saying. We're gonna get like too lost in the words over here. I don't want to say too much. If you're not already lost.
So could you feasibly like do the opposite? So we already talked about like a proper soda, but like you add crackers. What if it's the other way around, where because crackers are usually looked at as a snack? What if you just ate a piece of bread, like a piece of challah, as a snack, like dip to wash and bench for like?
Oh yeah, so it's gonna talk about that.
Like,
yeah,
like one piece of bread with like butter, like
totally.
Nothing,
Yeah. Okay. So it's a very good question. So if you look in Shulchan Aruch, it's a very good question. It's actually brought
He's
up.
not special.
What?
He's not special.
He's not special. No.
No.
So listen,
He's not exempt.
no, he's not exempt. So but in Shulchan Aruch, it does say, what if you're just having the bread, like you have a good dip, but all you have is a piece of bread? I don't care about the bread. All I care about is the dip. But I just need the dip. I just need to put the dip onto something, and that's all I have available. So the Shulchan Aruch says you don't wash or bench for that, for the bread. That's fine. And even if you eat a bunch of bread, it seems to say, you don't wash or bench for the bread because the bread is not what you want. It's not your intention. However, poskim nowadays, I mean halachic authorities, all hold everybody must wash because nobody has that mindset. Everybody likes bread, and it's not going to be considered. It very rarely, if ever, is a person like the bread is meaningless to me. It's absolutely meaningless to me, and I just care about the dip. You enjoy the bread. You enjoy the bread the way the bread. You enjoy the way the bread tastes with the dip. So, yeah, it's a good question. And I just woke up my kid. Okay. Okay, we'll stop here because the next one is also very long, and it requires a big background information. Okay, we'll stop here. Sorry for the late start, everybody. Okay, Ari, feel better. Moishi Mazdov, Bella,
Thank you.
good to see you. Sir, all Ted.
Thanks, Rabbi. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
If you guys have questions, just text me. All right,
Thanks.
I'll see you.
Shalom.
Peace.
Peace. Peace.